Well, this is my best turnout at this town hall. I've never had a turnout here. I think, I used to do these a lot, and I haven't done them in 5 or 6 years. So now we've gone to rely on cable to get the message out about town meeting, so that's what we're doing. So usually when I do these, I talk about town meeting, the budget, town meeting process. You've all been there, so that's kind of redundant. Couple quick things, if people don't know this, these reader boards here, these are all economic development, priority development sites that we've identified and the state's identified as well for development in this community to diversify the tax base. If you don't know, we're 97% commercial tax, residential tax base, I wish it was commercial, and then 7% commercial industrial. So to grow that number is important. And these are the sites that can do that. We had a bond rating call yesterday, and we gave a tour of these sites to Standard & Poor's. We're looking at the future growth and development of these sites. The longest standing priority one is Grafton Science Park over there. You know, it is permitted through the state, and it has a master plan through the planning board, 660,000 square feet. It should have been developed by now, but it hasn't been. But if you added all these up in terms of revenue, new revenue to the town, it's probably $6 million a month. So that's why it's important to focus on these, and that's why they're up. These will be in the hallway once we build a framing structure for them. So people who come here to get permits for any other project will see these. The 105 Westboro Road one down at the bottom right, that's the site where UPS will go. And we worked hard at collaborating with WBDC, and actually the town of Grafton had a 1 acre parcel that kind of divided a parcel between the Rush One property. Actually, you can see it right there where it's missing. This was town-owned property. We went to town meeting and asked them to let us release it. This gentleman bought it and made a nice square for himself, and then this parcel was owned by WBDC, which is pretty much right here. He made an even bigger lot to get out to Centennial Drive. So in terms of day-to-day stuff to make things like that happen, UPS paid $18 million for that, and they did not have a permit in hand. So that's kind of what we talked about with Standard & Poor's yesterday. The dollars from these developments will obviously offset tax burden to the residential, but it'll add new growth that we also desperately need for schools, roads, police, fire, just general operations. So also with that, we have development team meetings on Thursdays at 2 o'clock. We'll let people come in. Anybody have a question about doing a roof or residential or new windows or conservation, whatever issues they have, all land use departments come together at 2, 2:30, sometimes by appointment, and we're there to answer questions and help either a homeowner or business navigate their way through the process. So those are just some small anecdotal things that we do to try to get traction in the world of economic development. There are a number of projects that we took part in, Cumberland Farms redevelopment, early on in development team meeting. Joe's been instrumental in changing and getting the Bolac Plaza rezoned for better use to have more value, with more amenities for us on that parcel. So there's small things we do. The Thoreau Dental Office is another one that's pretty important to us. If anybody remembers that white colonial building that was there, it was nice enough, but the value was $314,000. Didn't yield a lot in tax revenue. Now it's valued at over $1.3 million. So in terms of turning things over, Creeper Hill Road is another one. I won't bore you with all of those, but they're just, we're thinking about things in terms of long-term productivity for income. So we have on the back piece of the Creeper Hill property, a cell tower, which has antennas, has a lease, and then we get revenue from every antenna that goes on. So that helps offset and helps us grow our revenue stream. And then on the expense side, you know, this building is now completely solar on top, and we are, you know, probably 70% of our electric bill is subsidized by solar. So we don't pay 70% less than we did, but we certainly pay a lot less than we used to. For the residents, we tried to do an energy aggregation program, which you may or may not know about. But for the first 18 months of that program, we were saving people on average $30 a month, which I think is a big deal for some, especially if we're talking about tax increases or increased levy capacity and asking people to pay more. If we can show, hey, we've offset your electric bill by doing things like the solar initiative we did. We only had 17 houses that took advantage of it, but we saved those people significant dollars from people who went on their own. The electric piece, I think, is a big deal because it gives people consistency and they know what their bills will be and know what their rate will be. So those are kind of value adds more than anything else. I will, if you want to cover the town meeting warrants, I'm happy to do that. A lot of folks talk online about this meeting and about questions that they have for people who work for us. Obviously, we have the building inspector here, Bob DeToma, Joe Layden, Rebecca Meekins, and myself. So I talked for 7 minutes. Do you all have questions or things you want me to cover before I go through the particulars of the annual and special town meeting?
I have one simple.
Well, she had her hand up, so I'll let her go.
I apologize. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Patriarchal. You were talking about the science park. One of the things in that area is the biohazard lab. Has anything ever been done with that? Have there ever been any tenants that could bring in revenue?
The BL3 lab is fully
Is it?
occupied, yeah.
Okay, good.
But it is a non-for-profit with a federal grant through Tufts, so.
You know, at the time when they brought it in, they were talking about how, you know, companies would be located near it, and I just haven't heard anything about that.
Yeah, well, we're working every day to bring someone to that site. We had a meeting on Friday with this, they have these site selectors that come out, you know, big law firms really, and this one was called Project Iris. And we're looking at the front of Lyman Gordon, which I don't necessarily like, and we can talk about that. We try to get them to this site. We also try to get them to the mass development site that's across from Anzio's, because that makes logical sense to me, because they are so close to the BL3 lab and to the community. But when you look at that whole quadrant of town, that has to be, you know, the village mixed use that we're thinking about from a village standpoint, from a transit-oriented development, that's critical. That it's not just one thing. It's not the 8.8 acres of Pine Street. It's not UPS. It's not mass development. It's not just a science park. It's all those things together that'll create a mass, along with Tufts, with 1,200 people, 1,000 people a day on campus. All those things drive business, commerce. We need to just put it all together in that one spot. So I don't know if I answered that question.
You answered that question.
All right. Go ahead.
I was just gonna ask about what's going on at Lyman Gordon. I know you mentioned it a few weeks back at the meeting, but has there been any change since then? Or?
There's been two changes. One is, in the beginning when we started to talk with Lyman Gordon, so I'll move a little bit so you can see the site here. It's about 1 million square feet, 200 acres of land. Lyman Gordon, which is now owned by Berkshire Hathaway, or Warren Buffett, basically, they want to divest. They want to sell land that they're not using. So the front nice brick building you see is up for sale. We think that'll be demolished in this plan. There's 29 acres right there. There was going to be, or there will be, if it didn't happen today, it'll happen Monday, a call for proposals. They'll put a call out to real estate developers and Fortune 100 companies and say, hey, we have this 29 acres. What do you give me for it? That's Lyman Gordon's approach to this. We had a meeting last Friday with Project Iris for that site. It was a 250,000 square foot biotech company. We learned today, was it yesterday? We got an email yesterday from Mass Development that they're going someplace in the 495 belt. So they're not coming here. I have a better plan for this because of the proximity to the Mass Pike. I think you can do a retail amenity center because of the access to the Mass Pike. There will be a destination and amenities for everybody who lives in Grafton, Worcester, all the way down to Millville, Uxbridge, all the way up. But, so that's the goal there. You know, if you think of Legacy Place and Dedham, that's what I kind of see pictured there. A lot of people say malls are going out. Take a ride to Millbury and tell me a mall's going out, because there's one vacancy in that whole place. I think it's Pier 1. But
They
anyways.
have a new tenant for that already anyway.
Huh?
They have a new tenant for Pier
Oh.
1. It's all
So
done.
I think this is an awesome possibility because of the Mass Pike. And who wants to go to Millbury, as much as we love our neighbors? At Christmas time, there's one road in, one road out, it's horrible.
Not in
So
December.
this has a
no way.
lot more, does everybody know what Legacy Place is? Because when I refer to it, people go, I don't know what that is. But that would be the goal. It fits there. We did an overlay to see what their dimensions were and what this was, and it fits there rather nicely. So I want all amenities there. I want to bring bowling back, because it used to be a big bowling thing in Grafton, right? Restaurants, chain restaurants, I don't care, the yard, whatever you can think of. Trader Joe's would be nice, even though Stop and Shop is a staple, they're on strike, so. And when we're talking, 2 to 3 years. But we have to start talking about it now, and since they brought us to the table, and I would argue a couple things. One, my assessor has a relationship with Ronnie Brooks, who's the manager of that, and then when this was bought by Berkshire Hathaway and Warren Buffett, I took an old school approach relative to that, to welcome Warren Buffett in a handwritten letter. Actually, I didn't handwrite the letter, I typed the letter, and he hand wrote me a letter back, thanking us for welcoming him to the community. So I thought that was cool. So that's relationship building that happens every day. But any other follow-up on that one? So I'm hoping the proposals come in, and I hope they sell it for, get the most they can out of it, and we'll shepherd them through a development process that's painless. Joe brought a recommendation to us when we were, probably before we met with the Realtor on site, is to allow for 43D zoning to be adopted, where we'd have expedited permitting. The same thing we do with this property here, the Rushmont property. It's a 180-day permitting process, provided they get all their documentation in line, which development team meeting helps do that. We're gonna adopt at May town meeting, hopefully the town meeting agrees, a 43D for this site to expedite that permitting. So it's one more tool that Lime Gordon has and the real estate agent has to say, buy this and we'll get you underway quickly.
Tim, and maybe Joe, you can probably lead into this. I saw Westboro has a warrant article about fast permitting. Is 43D similar to what they're doing?
Yes, exactly. Westboro hadn't adopted any provisions 43D. 43D basically identifies once town, through town meeting, designates land within 43D. And then the landowner also needs to sign indicating that they want to participate in this. What it allows for is or really represents a commitment by the town that all permits, not building permits, but all regulatory permits from Board of Health, Planning, Conservation, water departments if needed, DPW, would be obtained within 180 days. Under the existing language, that gets coordinated out of planning office, but the Board of Selectmen sort of are the energy behind making sure that everyone is coordinated. I think for a lot of larger projects, people may not realize that we actually do a really good job in staying under that amount for projects like Thoreau Dentist Office. Subdivisions are different because a lot of that on timescales is really on the developer to respond. But when you get someone coming in with a commercial facility, they've committed engineering dollars, they've committed a lot of resources to get that done. And I think over the last number of years, Grafton has shown that we're able to do those sorts of approvals well below any sort of 180-day threshold. And it basically just reflects a commitment from the town that we're going to get that taken care of. We have a lot of permitting processes. The open counter over there, planning and conservation, we're in one office. We do a lot of coordination with our permitting so that 1 week they're at planning, the next week they're at conservation, we're doing peer review at the same time. So we're trying to take some of these steps just to make sure that we're not just passing between departments, but we are coordinating those reviews.
And just a follow-up question to that. So with the 43D process, does that have to be done every single time with a landowner with an intent purpose? Or is that something we adopt and then we can engage, or the town can engage with any landowner that has an interest to go through this 180-day process?
That is property specific. So for example, the Grafton Science Park and Center Park have individual parcels that are designated 43D. Same thing with the UPS site, the Rushmont property. that was rezoned that was included in the 43D expedited permitting zone about 3 years ago. So it's only for that property because the property owner to, sort of go to that analogy as far as a commitment, that property owner is also committing to participating in that process. And it's 180 days from the submission of a complete application. That means that they're doing a lot of engineering, traffic, stormwater, a lot of stuff up front, knowing that they can spend that money up front, knowing that in about 180 days they can get some form of approval. It doesn't remove any ability of the towns themselves to sort of push off the thoroughness of the review. It basically just reflects that we're taking all of these things and just really concentrating in a 180-day period. But it's not something that you all of a sudden it's open to everyone. If you owned land off of Providence Road and you wanted to develop it and expedite permitting, that would be a separate zoning change to include your property in there, and also approving, signing a document that then all goes to a state agency. Essentially, it's a omnibus group of different permitting people that then take the town's bylaw, that signature, identify why is this unique, why is the town looking for this expedited permitting, and then they approve it, because this interagency group is then overseeing that process to make sure all approvals are done in that 180 days. And unless there's an agreement to extend beyond that, there are some ramifications as far as automatic approval if that process is not lived up to in a faithful manner.
So before I get to the warrant, is there other things that folks want to hear about or cover?
I have a curiosity
Sure.
question. So we've had some interest in the science park and the Centec Park. What are the reasons that people decide not to come? Do you have like a list?
No, there's two reasons.
Okay,
Location is one. The second, and I say that because in 2009, there was 1 million square feet of built space in the 495 corridor. So we tough to be competitive when you're a little bit isolated from the Mass Pike at this location. The second impediment that I think we've learned about, one we overcame pretty quickly, was the height of fermentation tanks, because the zoning bylaw only allowed, I'm gonna get it wrong, 35 feet. The company we were talking to needed 55 or 75. We changed that like within 6 or 8 weeks at town meeting, so we signaled to the state, and we signaled to that particular Bright Horizon, Bright Sky, whatever the code name was for the pharmaceutical company, that we were agile, we could move. They went overseas, they went to Switzerland or the Netherlands, someplace over there. The other piece is Tufts owns the property. The legislation to transfer the land from the state to Tufts University, they were told they could only lease the land for up to 100 years. So there are not too many biotech companies or Fortune 100s that want to lease, they want to own their land. So that's been an impediment that Tufts is willing, we're willing, we're moving that process through the legislature, not right at this very moment. But everybody knows that that's an impediment and we need to remove that.
Just a follow-up to that, Tim, thank you. Is there any possible mechanism with the state legislature to perhaps maybe change that on a unique basis? I know it has nothing to do with 40D, but like you were saying, when they review the town bylaws and what's the unique, opportunity for the town, and, do you adopt this? But is there something very similar that we could perhaps investigate with the state legislature to perhaps maybe?
Yeah, one's gonna be agency or bureaucratic for the 43D, that's gonna be an agency thing with Mass Econ or MOBD. The legislators need to vote to remove the language from the enabling legislation to transfer the land. So they need to change that, that's gonna be completely separate from anything with 43D.
I understand. I was saying, is there a similar process that and has that been done in Massachusetts before, where they transferred that lease to owned?
I don't know.
I mean, I think with having, as Tim mentioned, starting last summer, we had conversations with Tufts as far as saying, would you be willing to, and all this stuff. Everyone's willing to. Now it's just basically seeing if we can work with our local legislators to file legislation to amend that original legislation that ended up with that land grant to allow for the possibility. Through some of the pharmaceutical companies that have talked to us, that definitely was sort of a mark against the property, because some of the companies like to own and they can, for whatever reason on their books, it's better than a lease. But that's not the only thing that basically has led to some unsuccessful inquiries into the property. Tim mentioned some things with zoning. We've been, over the last 5 years, I think, very flexible as far as taking away some of those hurdles. Height was one of them. We allowed it height through supermajority of the planning board. Another thing was that previously there was an area within Grafton Science Park that was zoned within the Water Supply Protection Overlay District, but it would never be used for water supply because the gravel bed just wasn't thick enough and didn't produce enough water to actually be a water supply. So if it's never going to be used for water supply and it doesn't contribute, and it was identified by a water specialist consulting firm that didn't contribute, we went to town meeting, and town meeting approved removing of that area. So that was something that it didn't prevent Grafton Science Park from being developed, but it basically said you can't put a building here, but you could put the parking, which is sort of a little ironic. The second thing is that for some of the other sites, there's more amenities around, and that there's a lot of times where there's other activities that are going on that bring more activities. So that's part of the reason why we undertook the North Grafton Transit Village study to look at what other development potential is within that immediate corridor around the commuter rail station, to bring some activities to then also a pharmaceutical company. Anyone looking there, they want to look, where can you go to eat without driving 15, 20, 30 minutes to find someplace and get back to work. And also other amenities. You know, we're looking at initiating a recreation path that would connect to North Grafton coming through this area. On the warrant is an article to rezone a front portion which is currently zoned office light industrial to allow for mixed use, to create and reinforce some of the ideas of doing a transit village as identified in that plan. And hopefully within the month, or within a month, we'll be closing on the Grafton State Hospital property, 8.8 acres that the state owns, so that we can do a mass
Sounds partnership.
Yep. A sales partnership for a transit village, you know, basically apartments and maybe some little cafes, other types of small service retail to really attract maybe some people who would like to live closer to the commuter rail, go into Boston, but be in more of a suburban area or rural area, and allow for some rental options that maybe, you know, young professionals might like, and sort of reinforce that area around the train station. So a lot of these things all come together, so it's just not looking at Grafton Science Park out in the middle of cow fields and not having some of the amenities some of these other companies are looking for.
And that's why I said at the beginning, there's not one thing that's gonna make this work. They all have to happen. This 8.8 acres here has to happen. This piece here was DYS land, now owned by Mass Development's 40 acres. It's adjacent to Discovery Drive and the Science Park. So instead of having 81 acres, now you have 120, but a whole bunch of frontage along Route 30, and this whole parcel opens up. You know, we walked that site with the bright sky, and they were like, "Oh, look how narrow it is. See how the building's laid out? It's like a long, narrow strip." Now we got this to Mass Development, it widens it, and they still have the length. So I mean, there's a nice campus feel for a biotech to go there. And we're making sure the Mass Development is talking to Tufts, and Tufts is talking to Mass Development. So the second end game, this came about because the governor's initiative called Open for Business. He went through, or told someone to go through, hey, where's all of our vacant land in the state of Massachusetts that we can potentially get on the books and start to earn some revenue? This was one of them, so they carved that off from DYS to Mass Development. 40 years ago, they carved off the state hospital land to Tufts, that same concept. But for a veterinarian school, I would say go back to this Open for Business initiative and say, Tufts, great partner, but let us take it back to Mass Development and let them do what they do and develop sites. Because Tufts, great partner, we want them. We want them here, we want them more than anything else. But they're a veterinarian school, what do they know about developing land? In my mind, not a lot. But this group is the same group that built the whole concept of partnership and sales partnership. Let's get it back to Mass Development. So that's the second piece, yes.
I've heard our water rates aren't really desirable for like pharmaceutical companies. Is there such thing as a commercial water rate or any plans to make it so it becomes desirable for them to come in?
There are some cost prohibitives for water. Both water districts are their own separate political subdivisions, so we don't control the water. We should, to be quite frank, we should have both water districts under the town. We will probably petition those folks when
Is
we
that how you
get
do
those
this
to the,
petition?
you know, they wanna come in and they're gonna be 200,000 gallons a day user. There needs to be some economic incentive to get them to come, so we'll have to have those discussions. But so far, the impediments, we've done an analysis to see where we're high for both sewer and water, but nobody who's come to the table has said, oh, your utility rates are too high.
I heard John Allen say that it keeps them from coming to the table.
I disagree,
Okay.
it does not, but there are a lot of things that keep them from coming, we need to just keep knocking down those impediments, but directly from a big Fortune 100, never uttered to us.
And that's where John Allen, Economic Development Coordinator, he's pulled together a lot of information as far as rates from other communities. You know, when you start identifying why a town may be successful and why it isn't, why another one isn't, and they can be right next door, there can be a lot of little things by themselves that don't make that much of a difference, but when you add a bunch of these up, it's like that's just one more thing. It's like, well, I could have lived with the water if I had this. It's really about trying to identify what we can also pull together as a really attractive package, and as Tim said, that is probably one of those things that if we go to the Grafton Water District and say, let's work together and try to address one of these, as it relates to a commercial rate, Westboro and some other municipalities have that to support economic development, and at the same time we have other things that they may not have. So depending on the company, sometimes it may or may not be that big of a deal, but it is something that we're pulling together research so we can at least then have that conversation on a town side.
And what offsets it, and it's not a big deal, but our sewer rates are lower than anybody else around. So the water that they're selling is getting flushed, that's cheaper than any place else. So there's probably an offset of at least 50% of that delta between the two. So for competitiveness, we can offset that. And of course, we have the tax increment financing that we're aggressive with as well.
So on a different subject, just something I thought of, the traffic right now in Route 30, 140 junction has been a little bit of a problem, and I know that we've had long-ish going construction on East Street and Institute Road lately. A lot of road closures and those are still going on. And the National Grid announcement just for Route 30 itself just announced and started.
Yep.
How much advance notice did we get from National Grid, and could we have done things so that we could have, wouldn't have Institute and East Street partially closed at the same time National Grid was doing that work?
Institute and, no, there was no way we could do it. We knew National Grid was coming, and we've announced it at many board meetings. And we did a traffic plan, they were supposed to put signs up much earlier than they did. And I guess they went door to door yesterday with some door knockers to tell people how bad it was. But again, it's the cost of economic development, right? There's a 17 kilovolt line that's going to be vaulted through that area. It's gonna service these places
Yes.
when they finally get here,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah,
I would ask everyone to be patient and say, hey, there's gotta
my
be some
point is
inconvenience.
with that question, people that are friends with and what is it, North Grafton, that live like on East Street or just off it, on the K Circle and stuff, that have to travel toward Framingham, Westboro area, and the routes they have available to go is greatly reduced. They have to travel a lot further out through other heavier traffic areas just to get, try to avoid some of this extreme slowdowns because of the, simultaneous areas of construction. So I didn't know, where we knew National Grid was coming for a while, we knew we were doing this other Institute road work, was
Well,
there any way?
Institute's not closed, so I don't know why you're saying Institute's
But
closed.
the area around it, I've not traveled soon a lot personally, but that area heading that same direction has had a lot of construction and road work.
Yeah, no, we did the berm, if we did it this week, it would, that's probably right, but that wouldn't be a closure. So I don't know,
And
and
it's
even East
also
Street.
not that long of a project because all the drainage work and
Oh, that
the
was all
subsurface work, that was all done last year. So now we're doing curbing and then the final coat of pavement. The National Grid, that's
Yeah.
gonna be multi-month,
Of
so
course.
at some point without delaying Institute, we're gonna be beyond that. So a month from now, we'll be okay. Now we're just dealing with Route 30
Yeah.
because that's gonna be more of a challenging project and then, with
Well,
our,
they,
with our
because
math
school
works.
is out too this week,
Yeah.
that's why they wanted to be on that side of the bridge and get past the school during this week, so they wouldn't impact the bus traffic. So that's why we agreed to let them do it this week,
Okay.
so they could at least start and mobilize. So there's never a good answer, we're gonna
Yeah.
inconvenience people, but in the sake of, providing a whole bunch of electricity, they're not just putting it in because they wanna put a $16 million KV system underground, they wanna do it because they know that there's people
course.
coming. So, I just want people to be patient, cause I got an earful from somebody who works for me, who lives on Route 30 on Waterville Street. They were right there, they couldn't come to my door, and I was like, I'll tell them. And I guess they did today, cause I got an email yesterday, they sent me the flyer, they went knocking on 60 doors. So, we're listening, just like, it's always tough. How about out back there, anything back there?
We're good, we're just taking it all in, right, Bob?
Yeah.
So I was late. Can I ask budget questions?
Sure.
Okay. So, my first question is, the school department put out, or Dr. Cummings put out a projection of the increase for the schools. And the past, since FY 2003. And next year, it's projected to get an increase of 3.15, which is the second lowest since 2003.
When you say next year, I don't know what you mean by
I
next
mean
year.
FY 21,
21, so fiscal year 20 starts July 1.
yes,
So in
and that's
20
4.5.
20 months from now, that's what the projection is,
Yes, when will you start talking about FY 21 budget?
August.
Yes, okay, so when in August, when you start talking about the FY 21 budget of 3.15, can you help me understand why it's the second lowest since 2003?
Probably because of the growth, you cannot sustain a growth more than that inside the school department. So for example, this year, 1.5 million, plus school choice of 400,000 is 1.9 million. If you go back to the override, you come to today, it's a $14 million increase over 5 years. It's not sustainable.
So since 2003, though, it's the second lowest. What's happening next year?
Second lowest is a percentage, what is it as a dollar?
It's as a percentage. It doesn't say here as a dollar.
Yeah, well, the dollar's important, because if it's on $16 million more than it was in 2003, you said? It's
2003.
way more than $16 million from 2003.
Well, it's every year since 2003.
Yeah.
And the first lowest was 0.
Yeah, that was in 2009, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So what's happening next year that makes this the second lowest?
In 2021,
Mm-hmm.
what's happening is we have 2.5, Proposition 2.5, that allows us about $937,000. And then there's new growth of about 550, so there's $1.4 million. So we take that 3.15
Mm-hmm.
as a percentage, that percentage exceeds all new money in this community. And with a $5,500 net increase in state aid, there's no place to go but to budget for the revenue we have.
Okay. It just seems like a big, second lowest.
No, yeah, no, there's no doubt about it.
Can I keep going?
Sure.
All right. How do you determine how the money's split between the town and the school every year when you make that decision?
I try to fund things as best we can with the money we have. For this year, going into 20, after you back out health insurance, the municipal budget grew $5,700. And the school department, we tried our very best to give them as much as we possibly could, which is $1.5 million. Plus school choice, not that, that just comes in because they made a decision about where they have space. That's $400,000 for this fiscal year that we're currently in. I have no idea what it'll be next year. But that's unprecedented amounts of money that we're working to fund the school system.
Okay. And, police contract, did you guys ratify that? I know you went into
Yeah.
executive session to do
Yeah.
that. Could you tell us about that? How much and for how long?
We were out 18 months, so they expired in 17, and then we did a 3-year deal with a 1-year add-on. And I don't remember the percentages too. I remember the total cost was $36,000.
No, it's like 48.
48,000 over basically 4 years. So there were twos, and I think there was an added one on the last day of the contract for a 1%.
Okay, so say it one more time. 3 years, 2, 2, 1?
No, I'm saying they were in the twos in terms of increase. So the net for the whole contract was $48,000. So
Well,
that's-
there's only 19 of them, so that's
but-
why it's low.
But $48,000.
Yeah, I mean, we gotta do it by
So,
percentage.
I figure I can manage 48,000 over 4 years. If we can't, we should just close up shop, move to Westboro, I guess. So I don't know what the percentages were, but I know on the last day of the fourth and final year, because we were out a year, it's a 1% bump at that
It's a half
point.
percent.
Oh, it's a half?
It's a half. So I think it's two, so it's 2 retro, 2 for this year, 2, 2.5, and then a half on the last day of the
And that's in
final year of the
2022
contract.
or 23?
I think it's 22, yes.
And any language change?
Not substantial.
No,
No,
the biggest
okay.
thing we got was agreement for certification and accreditation.
Yeah.
And that was part of that 1%.
Okay,
So we paid for that, but now we will have an accredited police department without any pushback from the union. And that was a big deal to us.
all right, great. Construction here at the municipal center, how is that paid for? Did we vote on that at May town meeting?
Construction, oh,
You
yeah,
talking
yeah,
about the
these,
counters?
Yeah, all the counters.
The one,
the ramps, all that stuff's going on by town meeting.
And that went through CIPC?
The counters were, yes, part
Okay.
of the capital plan. The ramps were also part of the capital plan.
Okay.
Yeah.
All
We
right,
haven't
good.
done the ramps yet because the bids came in excruciatingly high, way over what we had money for, so we've sort of phased it out, so we're gonna do it in phases, cause we can't afford to do it all now, so the first phase will start hopefully end of May.
Okay.
Do you mind if I ask a question?
Yeah,
going
keep-
back
yeah.
for 1 minute? Tim, you kept mentioning with state aid and what the town's revenue is, it's about the school budget, mind you. Would you agree that the Grafton School District going into school choice was a good, smart move financially to help offset the local burden on the budget in this town?
I don't know, we did it in 14, you adopted it in 14. It doesn't offset our appropriation, it's an addition to your appropriation.
Right, so would you, in your estimation, if we didn't have school choice monies coming into the district, do you think we'd be better off or worse off?
You would be better to answer that than me, I would think you're better off with it.
Okay, I just want to know
Yeah,
your, I
but
never
I mean,
asked you
it's-
guys' opinion on that.
I don't understand the part, I don't know. I mean, it seems like it's pretty.
Because you were
evident.
saying $400,000 is a good thing that we were
Yeah.
getting in. Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, without it, you would be enjoying 1.5 million without 400,000.
Right. What's the status of our lawsuits here in town, and that was something that Craig had asked Jay during the TRICOM, and I was just curious about it from the town side as well. I know Craig was asking Jay about it. What's the status of our lawsuits, how many do we have, and how much have we spent so far in that line item this year?
First, well, there's a lot in that question.
Yes.
We have insurance for errors and omission. When people act inside the scope of their duty and they get sued, there's coverage. They either settle those, we litigate them to the end, someone else pays for that, the insurance company pays for that. We have no lawsuits pending currently that are against people claiming they've acted outside the scope of their employment. We have 130,000 total in legal expenses for the town, both labor council and general council. 108, all right. It was 130,
It's not
so that's
anymore.
what I remember. So,
We'll spend that.
in terms of,
We'll spend, okay.
you know,
We'll
there's
spend
a newest civil rights violation against 2 employees that is being defended. We think they're bogus claims, but people can sue us anytime for any reason and we'll defend them.
Mhm.
That's the only one that I really think that's big that's out there.
So 2.
Well, 2 individuals, 1 suit.
Oh, okay. All right, great. What budget changes have been made since we've all come together at the TRICOM? Because I know like your contract, you had originally budgeted for 5% and that was settled at 2%. What happens to all that money now? Do you reallocate that? And does that get brought to us at town meeting as changes in the line item?
Yeah, the adjustments we made in the line item budget, most of all the adjustments we made for any place, you can speak to exactly, but it's going back to health insurance because there was no margin for any movement in health insurance.
Yeah, so just, you wanna add?
Yeah, because
Oh,
I
go
thought
ahead,
health
yeah.
insurance came in lower than what it was budgeted at.
Yeah. it
Yeah,
did.
okay.
So it did, which is great. We were carrying 8, it came in at 5.4. However, this year, we were carrying 8 on last year's appropriation. This year, we had 75 new employees join health insurance, which is more than, we don't budget for anybody to join health insurance,
Mhm.
so when anyone joins, basically, the budget's blown, essentially. So we'll have to move money in May to show up 19's health insurance account. And so then the 5.4 that we budgeted on last year's number is not going to be enough to even cover the people that we currently have, the new people that have come on, if they stay on, we don't know, but we assume they will. So any new money that we come by or can find right now is going into health insurance line, because we know we're gonna need more than what we have now.
So anything like that for line items will
Yeah.
go. Because did you budget 2% for police?
What do you mean, for the increase for the salaries?
Hmm.
Yeah, pretty much everybody.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we
okay.
we assumed we were gonna settle for 2, that's what we carried.
So that's what you
no
carried, okay.
changes have been made to the police budget, that's what we budgeted is, will
Mhm.
cover the contract.
Okay.
I'm trying to think of other, we found a little bit of money came up in BVT, cause that came in a little lower, that got moved to health insurance.
Town insurance was, we still think it's going to be
Yeah.
lower by a little, and that'll just get moved to health insurance as well. We just don't know what that final number is. It's about a $540,000 number, so we think it might be $5,000 or $10,000 less than that. But we beat them up all the time
So
to try to get lower.
yeah, it's a little higher than that, but that's, yeah. We're carrying 634 right now, I
Mhm.
think, and we think we're probably gonna be able to shave about 25,000 off of that. We're not moving it now, cause we don't have any confirmation yet, so what will happen is that we'll present it as is in May, and then if we get confirmation in October, we'll ask town meeting to make the adjustment then.
And move it to health insurance. 'cause
And
we
move
think
it to
that's
health
what it's gonna
Insurance,
be.
okay. So health insurance will probably be the only place things in October get moved to.
Right now,
Yeah.
Okay, all right. I have more, but I feel like I'm like dominating.
Everybody
Just
wants
keep
to know what
going?
you're asking.
Yeah. What's the approach to budgeting? I know years ago when I was on finance committee, it was whatever it was budgeted the year before, we just kind of carried it over. Is there any more talk about budgeting based on actuals, zero-based budgeting? You know, we're coming up into this place where, how much did we give back? 1.3 million last year? What are we projecting will be the turn back this year?
Not 1.3, it was more like 700,000.
700,000.
60 million.
And then what do you think it will be this year? Do you have any idea yet?
No, I can't even hazard a guess. Well, we think, when we went to the bond rating agency
Yeah.
yesterday, we were a variance plus or minus 400,000 on the 61 million.
Okay, all right. So what is the approach to
But
budgeting?
the zero-based budgeting, I'm glad you asked it, because, you know, my second year of undergraduate, you know, we talked about, you know, Jimmy Carter being president and the USDA going through this thing called the zero-based budget, which was just for the USDA, and they assumed they had no pencils, they assumed they had no pens, and then they just budgeted from there. We would never do that, it's the worst thing you could possibly do. So we have a line item budget that goes to town meeting, 90% of it is salaries, so it's not like I know Joe's performing a function, I can see him every day performing that function. I don't have to rethink that function unless I fire him, and then I have to hire someone else, hopefully at a lower number, and then I can move that money to health insurance. But there's no, some people do performance-based budgeting where there's actual outcomes. We don't have a product, we just have service, and on a very thin margin in terms of how many staff provide that service. So we want people to justify their good ideas in their budgets, but when 90% of salaries, we're just providing service.
So I'm so happy you said that, because it reminded me of I promised my last question. Do we ever do like an audit, like I know the school department does it for the sense of, like, this is what our Shrewsbury has for curriculum staff, for example, versus Grafton. Do we ever do that with our town government here? Like, do we say, okay, whatever our budget is, 63 million or whatever it is, or 18,000 residents, like towns, what do they have and what do they have going? Do they have assistant town planners or assistant town administrators, or, do we ever do that type of reporting?
No, we don't do that reporting. Because we travel in circles of our fellows, our brothers and sisters of town administrators, I know what their staffing levels are. One of the board's goals for me this year coming up is to look at the sister communities in terms of how many people they have in the Board of Selectmen's office, what's their payroll expense, what are their expenses, planning, conservation, Board of Health, all those things rolled up by department to see how they compare across that cross-section. So we are going to do that, but
Great.
I can tell you that I will, and I want that to happen, because I think we're leaner than anybody else around. I will tell you this, the assistant town administrator, and Peter would remember because he was here, other people might as well, but we had an engineer and we had a DPW director that was like a $219,000 without health insurance. The DPW director left, circumstances not to be revealed. Because of the charter, the town administrator becomes the de facto department head and DPW director, so I assumed that role for some time. But we had a net savings of over $200,000. The Board of Selectmen at the time, probably at the prompting of Natalie ahead of that, an assistant was needed. Of course an assistant's needed, there's a lot of stuff to do. So that's when we started with Kevin, went to Doug, and now with Rebecca. Never backfilling the engineer position, and never backfilling the DPW position. When we finally did fill the DPW position, we were creative about it, we were thoughtful about it, and that was $107,000, $120,000 at the time when we had Duhani here. Now I have Paul, who's DPW director and source superintendent, and we split his salary 60-40 between an enterprise fund and the general fund. Always a net savings to the general fund.
I mean, I did some quick Googling searches, and it seemed like half had an assistant, half didn't, so I'll be very curious to see that report when that comes out for all the departments, so I'm not just picking your department, like,
Yeah, no,
for all the
there'll be
departments up
nuance,
here,
right?
I would
There'll
be very.
HR, we do part-time, and
Yep.
we share that responsibility. IT, even though the web is down right now, I apologize for that. Because we're sitting here, we can't go reset the button at
Right.
7 o'clock. So I mean, we do that. We do that for $49,000 for someone to manage that environment. That's an amazing number. So I'll put all those numbers against anybody. I'll tell you, Webster, Oxford, I'm sorry, the former town manager, I had lunch with him yesterday. They had a budget of $250,000 for IT, for Oxford. Oxford, really? It's a lot of dough. And I don't know.
Does that include their school as well,
No, that was just.
just
their
for the town
municipal.
side?
Yeah. I don't know what they were doing.
Yeah.
But, and there were multiple people, it wasn't one person making $250,000, it was multiple people.
And just to add on that, I've worked in a number of towns before coming to Grafton, and find that every town has different thoughts as far as where they need the assistance. So some may have an assistant town administrator, but others may then have like a specific budget analyst, or they have a much larger human resource department dealing with benefits than other towns. Some have GIS, as Tim said, town engineer, but maybe have a part-time conservation agent. So it's all about finding that mix, because if you almost have to look at the whole governmental structure and see the services they're providing, because If you just look at the finance side, it may not match. It may look like we're understaffed. Or if you look at land use side, it may look like we're overstaffed compared to others. But then you have to understand how maybe some of those things that we do in planning and conservation and the land use maybe get handled by other departments or other boards, even things that are separate. I used to work in Metro West, and we used to be part of a affordable housing collaborative, basically. So you didn't have an assistant town planner doing affordable housing. You paid to be part of a larger office. So a lot of it is then you may be looking at dollars for what's being done for services, and finding out that looking at one department versus the other, you really have to look at a whole systematic approach to those services. And you know, my at least perception is that Grafton is very streamlined as far as finding that balance for what the residents are looking for. And you know that.
But there's compartmentals inside there, right? So trash in most communities either resides with Public Works or with the Board of Health. Trash, we do trash. You know, Becca gets the bags, tries to get them the best quality she can. Put this all
Working
in
on it.
Yeah.
So I mean,
She instantly regretted having you say that, I'm sure.
And before you came in, we talked about the electricity. You know, we went to town meeting and asked, can we aggregate the load for the residents to do electricity to try to save money? And of course, everybody has a choice. They can stay with National Grid, or they can go with our lower rate, which can save people money for a long time. Those things wouldn't happen if I was just saying we had a DPW director and we didn't have Becca. You know what I mean? So there's those things we're always trying to find value adds. Curbside recycling would be Board of Health or would be DPW. Becca did that whole piece in terms of those pink bags that no one has to figure out, do I go to Savers with this, or do I go to Salvation Army? Now you just put it in the pink bag and put it roadside for your recycling day, and they pick it up. So I mean, it's like we're trying to save you gas, help the environment. I mean, there's all those things that go into that thought process. The Board of Health, Animal Control, Veteran Services, all that stuff is consolidated and regionalized. Ambulance service was 150,000 when I got here. It's zero today because we said, hey, you got a good deal. They got a cash flow of like $800,000 a year from Grafton residents. You don't need to be subsidized by us. You know what I mean? So we were always trying to find a way to reduce that cost. And I don't know if there's any other good examples besides the solar, the grants for the LED lights, that type of stuff.
Yeah, green communities, that was a huge feat for us. It was a long-term goal for us that we reached with the help of someone in Joe's office, Conservation, Leah Cameron, who helped us out there. So it's a team effort. It's not, you know, no one of us is responsible for only one thing. It doesn't work like that. And it doesn't work like that upstairs, you know, in school department. We all wear lots of hats and do different stuff.
Yeah, it's not McDonald's. There's no division of labor. No one guy's making fries.
Right.
Because there's not enough fries to make. So you have to do other things.
I think that report will help too, like to see if other towns regionalize or outsource other things. And I'd also be curious to see when you do that report, to add in anything that we contract out for P&D, right? Like if somebody doesn't have a stamp for something, like we might be paying that person $60, but that's also costing us $40 to contract out for that. So I'll be curious to see how that plays into the report as well.
Yeah, I'm not so sure I'll get to that level of detail when you say a stamp, like by a PE? Like a building architect?
Yeah, like when we have to outsource for that type of stuff, right? Like, because there's a savings by not paying someone full-time to do that, but then we go out and outsource it. But there's still a cost.
Yeah.
So that's still, to me, a labor cost. So even though you might have 4 people less than, say, an Auburn does, you're still paying for services, even though a person is not housed here to do it.
Yeah, but those are project-based, so I don't know, it'd be tough because I don't have a person to compare it to if I do contract.
But if Auburn, let's say, for example, Auburn has that person in-house full-time, you guys could come back and say, oh, look at it, you know, we've got one less person than Auburn does, but we still pay $40,000 to outsource that skill.
Oh, I got you. So the Health Alliance that Auburn is not in, so I have one admin and I pay $75,000 a year for septic and all inspections, wells. So
Yeah.
how does that compare to others? But just for that, I just have the one, when I had a Board of Health agent that did 65 plus benefits, so I put her at about 85. It took me 7 years to get back to the number I was at when I
We're
had
still
it
not at
full-time.
it. So it's still, like, we did the analysis to look at if we had kept the health agent and kept the admin for all the years, given them, 2% every year, cost of benefits, and then follow the union contract for the admin, would we be saving money today, or have we already crossed the threshold? Are we spending more on the alliance? And we're still saving money in FY20. It's not a lot, it's like $5,000, but, I mean, to get the level of service that we're getting with the alliance that one single agent could just not possibly do, that was a good decision for us,
Yeah.
for the community. for
But
the
just an
people
example,
we're-
I mean, the detail, I don't know if I'm gonna get to that level of detail. And
Yeah,
that-
I mean, I don't
Because it's
know,
not just apples to apples, right? It's not just there's three
Yeah.
people sitting in this seat in Auburn, there's two people two people
That'll be
sitting
the
in this.
first layer of the cake.
Yeah, all right.
You know, how many are in the clerk's office? How many are in the treasurer collector's office?
Yeah.
How many bills do you have? How many people are planning? That'll be the first layer in
Yeah.
terms of the.
well, we're gonna look at personnel and expense
Yeah.
also.
Yeah,
So
that's
it's not just
where
gonna
the
be
the goal's
personnel,
gonna be, is the
it's gonna
expense.
be the expense line too.
Yes.
But I mean, our expense lines are,
Small.
I mean, they're small, and they shrunk significantly in 20. A net increase of, $7,000 for all municipal departments. Giving people salary increases, the cut happened somewhere. A lot of it was on the expense side.
Yeah, we didn't replace people that retired and people,
We merged positions,
Yeah.
just being creative. Trying to be.
trying. Any other, with your phone, you're out of battery or what?
No, that was it. That was the last of the questions, believe it or not. But I'm sure over time, give me 5 more minutes, I can
I've been here
regenerate.
for 10 years, Lisa,
What?
where you been?
What do you mean, where have I been?
I've done it for 10 years, the questions will always be there.
The questions will always be there, yes.
I do have one follow-up question. Last year, when town meeting authorized to set up a special revolving account for extraordinary expenses with special education, and then we transferred $200,000 from one stabilization account into that other stabilization account, there was mention with the Board of Selectmen at a joint meeting that whatever residuals were unencumbered from the school department should be considered as that amount being transferred into that account to continue growing it at some sort of modest rate, not like the transfer that we did. Can you share with us if there's any plan at town meeting to transfer any amount of money into that stabilization account for this?
Does the school have any money to turn back?
We turned back money last year.
That-
$16,000, I mean,
Okay, $60,000. So by that alone,
only Jake can answer, I don't know that.
no, we turned it back to the
Yeah, to the general
to
fund.
the general fund. But do you have any plans to be funding that account? Like the selectmen had asked that we use any unencumbered
We
money.
didn't put an article on for
No,
that, no.
and I guess we could, right, under,
Article 1?
no, budget adjustments, I don't know if you can move
Oh,
into an
no, you
article,
can't.
but does Jay anticipate any turnback? Because that's where he would have thought, oh, I'm gonna have money in IT, I'll move that into this. We did not think
We turn back money every year to the town. It might be, 10,000 or 16,000, I think was last year, by guesstimation. I was just curious that, based on the meeting that was had by the Board of Selectmen and their comments about their reservations of setting this up, but if it did go through, how would we sustain this? Like, what would our policy be going forward? And I was just asking, have you considered it in this time meeting? It sounds like you haven't.
No, not at all,
Okay.
because I wouldn't know how much money you have to turn back.
We turned it back last year.
We don't know what you're gonna turn back this year.
Well, that's the challenge of having town meeting in May and then not
You
having
can't
it
go
for
back and
fiscal
get the
year.
six-
No, you've already
16,
got the money in your general fund right now from free cash I think it was certified in October.
Oh, you wanna know if we're gonna transfer free cash into
Whatever that
stabilization.
amount is, yeah, whatever
So
that
it would be,
amount is.
it would
but-
be from free cash into,
Yeah, so I would say this, not to be siloed, but all the money comes in and we disperse it to every department. We try to be equitable about that, town meeting votes on it. Whatever's not spent rolls up, gets the fund balance, gets certified as free cash, and then we divvy up capital. And we keep $1 million in reserves. So I will tell you, the school department should tell me how much you wanna put in there and create an article around that.
Well, that wasn't the discussion last year, so I was just
I
curious. You
I know,
don't-
but I'm
you
just
don't-
telling you, cause you're
you
making it
don't-
seem like I missed something.
No,
and
no,
I'm
no,
just
no,
saying-
I just asked if there was a plan and if you
No,
would incorporate it.
not by
And you
me.
answered that question, I was fine with that. And I said
But I
go-
would say, you
going
guys should,
forward-
if you wanna do it, you should do it.
But going forward,
Yeah.
any unencumbered money that taxpayer has put into that, I mean, we did say that should that be used to be, transferred into that account for that purpose, and over time,
Yeah.
I hear we don't have one, but you're asking the school department to do that, which is something I guess, could be brought up at the school committee and with Jay, but I just didn't know, because once it goes into when it comes in unencumbered funds at the end of the year and it's certified free cash, after we give it back, the school department has no authority, right, to make any requests or use that money.
At town meeting.
Well, yeah, you
Town
can,
meeting
just so we're clear,
Yeah.
any board or committee that's
Can
duly
submit an
appointed
article.
can
Yeah.
take a vote to submit an article to town meeting. So
Yeah.
this is democracy. You decide as a group, finance committee wants to, you're not a finance committee anymore, but if you were, and you wanted to move money in or out of any line, you can pitch it to town meeting.
You
to
gave
do
me,
that.
gave me a great answer, that was good.
Yeah, so I'm trying not to be argumentative, but I would never assume, just like you came to us to say, hey, let's create this account, I wouldn't think you would think that I would say, let's sustain that account with money that was turned back from the school. I would think the school department would come back to us and say, let's sustain the account with this warrant article, with a turn back.
It just, the discussion, I guess, is different than what this, what we're having here.
Yeah,
And
I don't recall
wanna
that
do
discussion
this,
at all,
but
but
I was just asking if there was.
the best
that.
way to sustain it is not to spend it.
And then at the same time, there is, but you gave me some really good pointers to bring back, so that's great, thank
Yeah.
you.
Would that require a warrant article every year, or just one to say going forward?
It'd be every year, depending on how they do it, right? If they have operations every year. So Jay, and I have to do this with our budget, how much money am I gonna have left in health insurance on May 13th for July 1? And I say, I think I can get $4,000 out of there, and I can go move this money over here. And if I hedge in correctly, I'm in trouble, because I'm dealing with 12 months worth of expenses with 10 months worth of data. If they did the same, they could take it out of their operating budget and move it into that, so that could be a special town meeting warrant article to fund that special ed circuit breaker account or whatever, with money they have in their operating budget today. If they can't do that, they can come and say, oh, we wanna put free cash, and move free cash into that stabilization account. Municipal finance is so fun.
I love it.
You hired.
Yeah, the Board of Selectmen agendas, is there any way just to add in there public input, so it's actually printed on the agendas?
It's up to the chairman of the board
Okay,
and the board of selectmen. They had it on for a while. I don't know who was chair at the time, John Dowling maybe? It was a long time ago. And I don't know, another chair got on, they didn't want it, and it was gone.
okay.
I think it was on there, 4 or 5 years ago as well for a little while?
Yeah, I think that's the one I'm referring to.
Okay.
I don't remember what the takeaway was or why they took it off.
But yeah, that'd be up to, right now, Sargon had a,
Yeah, I've mentioned it to him, because I came to tri committee and that was non-public. I came to the following selectmen's meeting and there was no public input there either. So I'm happy to be here with all these questions that I would have been happy to ask that night, but I think it would be nice to have public input. Do you have to legally have the public input at meetings?
No, not in Massachusetts. Some states do. New Jersey and Ohio, they're mandated that you have to take public comment, but not in Massachusetts.
Okay.
Maybe someday. Maybe they can legislate it.
Maybe someday.
Or maybe we can just do it here in Grafton.
Yeah.
Because there's no benefit in coming to a meeting. I can watch this on TV if I can't ask my questions.
Yeah.
so, on your budget, specifically the town administrator budget, I noticed 2 items that struck me as kind of the same thing, but you could probably explain this better to me. The assistant personnel, administrative personnel for assistant to the town administrator, and the assistant to the town administrator line, they're both budgeted at 57,000 and then 82,000 roughly. So so
That's,
one of them is
that's me and that's Cindy. Cindy's
Okay.
the administrative assistant.
There's an assistant town administrator, there's an administrative assistant.
Yeah, I was gonna ask
Two
who it
different
was. Yep.
Two different-
Just the assistant to the town administrator,
Okay.
the other one's the assistant town administrator.
Just making sure I got that correct.
If you watch
I
The
figured it was
Office,
an- yeah.
it's really funny.
You got
Figured
it.
there was an easy answer.
So does anybody wanna go over the warrant articles? Or you think you got it all?
We're doing our thing too.
We're gonna do a TV
We
show,
do
so
our
you
thing
can watch
tomorrow.
it.
So what's the big thing this year? Like, what's the chickens?
Styrofoam.
A petition for marijuana in village mixed use in South Grafton.
Okay.
And
That'll be the-
polystyrene.
I do have another question or two regarding the LED stuff. That's more than questions that I asked you like 2 weeks ago. But did you want to briefly cover that again in case anyone here doesn't know, or do we want to just go into it?
Yeah, just ask your
Okay.
questions.
So, it's coming. The budget for doing the replacement for the LEDs is coming from the grant. We hope, and we still need to purchase all the poles. But does purchasing the poles, do we take any like ongoing operational expenses with regards to buying them outright? Like if someone drives into a pole, do we pay to replace it?
We'll buy an insurance policy, the National Grid mandates that we have, and we've already had that discussion with our insurer, so we have that number covered.
So like purchasing them outright, we won't take any year-over-year costs, like wind knocks something down or someone drives into it, nothing would happen for.
They're gonna be
more.
responsible, if there's lines on the pole with, has electricity,
Yep.
cable, all that stuff, they're gonna fix that. If it just has a light on it, and there's no other utility on it, we're gonna fix it, but we're gonna be insured to fix it.
Okay. And
Where are you talking about?
Maybe your point's better taken if I did say, we have a warrant article, because we're part of Green Communities, we're applying for a grant to change all the street lights throughout the whole town. I don't know, 700 of them, 350 of them, there's some number of street lights, they go to
It's not
LED. You gotta own the light before you can change it from the mercury to LED, or sodium vapor. So they'll go to LED, they'll last, they'll be cheaper. We spend about $75,000 a year in electricity costs for unmetered utility poles. Is that
That's right,
the right number? That's a lot of money, so if I can cut that by 40%, the hope is I have a return on investment, especially when I'm having the Green Communities grant pay for the lion's share of the lights to be changed over to LED. So in the article, we made a commitment to the state to say, I'm gonna throw a number out, say it's $1 million to do all the lights, and I get a grant for $800,000. I need $200,000 so I can do the project. Those are not the numbers, I'm using that as an example. So that's what the warrant article is there. If I get to May 13th and I already know I'm gonna get the grant for the whole coverage, we'll just pass over the article. But I could need money, just so there's no big surprise, and I gotta find out where it's coming from, so you just have to vote yes or no. You guys got an easy job, as long as the clickers work. Becca can bring you, if anybody has questions on the clickers, Becca's been working with the IT committee, and my
Dave
guys
can
here.
bring us up to speed.
That might be a
So-
good thing to talk about, just so people who watch this
Yeah,
before coming to town meeting are understanding what's been done and, have some
well,
confidence
Dave
in the
will
clickers.
tell you everything he's done.
Dave, tell us.
The method bit.
So after, after last year, May and October, any of us who were at town meeting remember very well how we got partway through and realized the clickers just weren't counting everybody's vote. So we undertook to try to figure out why that happened. And fortunately, we have pretty reliably determined that what happened was a simple matter of placing the 2 radio base stations that serve the clickers. Up until last year, we just had one set of clickers and one radio base station, never a problem. Last year, we got a new system because we only had 500 clickers, and not last year, but the year before last, we had a May town meeting where we had more than 500 people. So we had to give up on the clickers before we even got to the annual town meeting. People just kept coming in, and but anyway, I could very easily make this a longer story than it really needs to be for everybody. And in fact, if you want to read the long story, we have a draft report that we put together, which is actually on the town website in the Information Technology Committee's page under a sub-page called Reports. So the report is, anybody can read it. It's like 22 or 23 pages of all the detail, or hopefully most of the detail, that a real tech geek would love to read and would bore most people to death. But anyway, the long and short of it is, when we got the new system, we had to get a second radio base station. And in the February town meeting last year, things seemed to work fine. But in May and again in October, what happened was we had the two radio base stations sitting too close together, so one was interfering with the other. And that was preventing the clickers from getting their votes counted. So, and we did a lot of testing, confirmed this with the vendor, that yes, the radio base stations can interfere with each other. And as long as we place them far enough apart, they're gonna work well. And we've tested them in that, in the auditorium on a kind of a small scale, kind of confirmed that yes, indeed, if they're too close together, they have trouble. If they're far enough apart, they're good. We also determined that, we found that some of the clickers' batteries were getting a little low, and low batteries in and of themselves aren't a problem. Even clickers with low batteries will work most of the time. But we bought a new set of batteries. I think we're going to replace the weak batteries because in marginal situations, the weak batteries could lead to some failures that might not otherwise happen. So the long and short of it is, we figured out what went wrong. We know how to set it up so that we can get the clickers to work reliably.
So you said you put them close together and you were able to reproduce the problem?
Yes.
Cool.
And
That's good.
and to my mind, we could have, gone down the list of all the things the vendor said, this could be, that could be it. And we could have just tried different things, shooting in the dark for the solution, but that's not the way I like to approach problem solving. I like to know that I'm actually solving the problem. Sometimes, some things when you try to repair it, all you can do is replace one part after another until it starts working. We didn't want to do that for the clickers. We want to be much more confident in what was wrong and that we've solved the problem.
And do you think if the draft is available now, that's really good. Do you think you'll have like a finalized report before town meeting?
The report is fairly well complete. The only thing it's lacking is the IT committee as a whole having reviewed it and approved it. I wouldn't mind getting feedback from anybody who cares to read it. I did get one little useful item of feedback on social media a few days back, and the report's been revised to reflect that. And that was without anybody reading the report, just asking a question about it. So I'm always willing to try to make it better if anybody has any suggestions or questions that the report doesn't answer that you think should be answered. We probably want to maybe publicize that more on the town social media, that the report is available.
Uncensored.
I just love that you have
Unredacted.
photographs
Yeah, that's
No,
what I meant
no
to say.
redactions.
of
That's
where
what-
the laptops and the base stations were at each of those there's actual photographs on this report of where they are to demonstrate.
I hope he
What
cited
not
Ken
to do.
Paluzzi as taking those pictures. 'Cause
Does the
he'd be in
IT
trouble.
committee meet, does the IT committee meet before the town meeting?
Yeah, the IT committee meeting schedule is somewhat irregular. We tried to have a meeting last week, but unfortunately not enough of our members ended up being able to make it, so we couldn't muster a quorum. I'm gonna try to get the committee together later this month, sometime between now and town meeting, just to sort of formalize this.
Logistics, we need to have a conversation with Ray Mead as well, the moderator, since he runs the meeting, because we need to make sure that the audience is comfortable with what Dave's done. If you already had that conversation, then you can continue.
Yeah, we haven't, I sent the report off to Ray Mead. When I did, I got an out-of-office reply that he was out of town until today. So I would certainly like to get the moderators, I think the moderator's opinion about whether we should try to use the clickers at this meeting or whether he wants more time to socialize it's kind of up to the moderator, and I haven't had any feedback from him yet. But yeah, we'll want to run this by the moderator, work it out with Ray what we want to have done, and spend some time prior to town meeting organizing the setup on the stage so that we make sure that we know what equipment we need and how to lay it out. So there's a few little details, but I'm comfortable that we understand why the clickers were giving us trouble the previous two meetings.
Hearing the mention of social media account, that brings me just to, who has access to post on it for the Town of Grafton Facebook page? You know, like what people or what particular department has that access?
Bob DeToma and me.
Okay. Thanks.
If we reply, it's always one of us.
Okay.
But there's
So-
different Facebook pages within the
Yeah,
town.
The
I was
formal
talking about
town
the
of
Town
Grafton.
of
The
Grafton.
formal town of
Yes.
Grafton.
Joe's office has, do you have don't you guys
We
have?
have Grafton Works as well as planning and conservation.
When do you think you'll find out about the bond rating, if it's gonna change or not?
They're going to committee next, Tuesday. The official statement comes out, I think, on the 22nd of April. So, middle to end of next week, maybe a week from now.
That's exciting.
Yeah, I mean, it's a 20% probability that we'll get an increase. The best thing that we can hope for is a AAA, but it'll probably be a AA plus with a positive, AA plus with a positive outlook. Just because there's, AAA communities in Massachusetts, there's 53 of them, and after the banking crisis in 2008, 2009, they did these things called stress tests for banks, and that's the same methodology to apply to a municipal bond rating.
Excuse me.
So, our financial analyst at Unibank thinks, if you don't get it now, we're doing bans for the library, because we're gonna be getting our money reimbursed to us, so I don't wanna borrow it all now, so I'm doing short-term notes in anticipation of getting that money from the state, and then I can use that money to bond the whole project at the right amount, as opposed to borrowing 14 million up front and then paying it back with the 7 million we get back from the state. So we're hedging a bit there, so I'm gonna have to do it again in 2020, 2021 for the long term, so if we get the positive, we'll probably get the AAA then. But it's 20% probability we'll get it. There's gonna be no net effect. I would tell you that the interest rate that we're carrying on our estimates for debt service will come out lower than the estimates we're carrying.
Have you heard any more from Nature's Remedy and how they're coming along with their project?
No, they're trying to offset 10,000 square feet of the front of their parcel for recreational sales to Machete Industries,
Right.
which I met with him, I don't know, last Friday, to talk about a host community agreement. So we're making headway with him as well.
And they've been in touch with my office as far as what would be needed for a modification of the existing special permit that was approved back end of 2017.
Which they need that before they really do anything else. That's gonna be critical.
Did we fund this part-time economic development specialist through an article
The
last
first-
year
the-
too?
The first year you did.
Last year we
As a
did.
pilot, last year we rolled it into the budget, now we're pulling it out again.
From available sources, what do you
It'll
see that
probably-
available?
Right now, it'll be free cash.
And did you pull it out to make room for something else in the budget? Is that why?
No, we didn't make room for anything.
To
we
balance.
just-
To balance it.
We didn't add anything, there's no one added.
I thought we were buying some land. Are we not buying land for with this?
Robinson.
CPC.
Yeah, which article is that?
It's a CPC article.
17,
7.
maybe?
It's 4 lots, Upton, Stowe.
475.
Oh, 18. 18,
No.
No.
Oh, that's
it's bond payment.
Which one is it?
I think it's in the
That should be
special.
special.
Oh, it's in the stuff, because we have to
that's-
close before.
That's why. Okay,
Skip
hold on.
special.
Everybody skips
Let's skip
special.
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 Oh, Robinson, yeah, page 3, Lisa. Article 12.
Thank you, Pete.
I just flew right off the chair.
How much is in that CPC money? They're looking to spend a lot this year, huh?
Yeah, they
No
have over
balance?
$1 million in.
Yeah.
They do,
contracts, yeah.
okay.
Well, awesome.
So, speaking of the CPC, two different questions, but one, Montgomery Common project. If I recall the warrant article, I don't have the right one in front of me, this is like second, but not all that money's coming from the CPC, is that accurate? For,
Article
It's
20.
68,000.
They have in-kind contributions that they use to satisfy
CPC
match
requirements,
requirement, they
yeah.
have a match requirement, even though it's their article, so they think I can do things, which we can, cause I have backhoes and workers and we
Yep.
can dig out the asphalt that's there. So that in-kind isn't a true cost, it's an in-kind cost, and they use prevailing wage rates to make that $68,000 number up.
Okay.
Of course, I don't pay prevailing wage to our people, they would love it if I did, but we would be broker than we are now.
Okay.
So, that's what that number is, so it's not true cash.
Okay. The other CPC related question, I still routinely hear people commenting in different ways about the super park. I understand that the project has completely sunset and the money from, that was put aside for super park is returned to the CPC fund.
Correct.
Can you speak more to that, is what I was.
Was that all of the money? Cause I thought
Well,
some
there's
of it.
$300,000 that's still left in the account for the super park.
Because that was not CPC.
For overlay, yeah, from
Okay.
overlay for that.
Okay, can you,
So when we get, the site plan for the library, is that congeals and we start to do that, we'll try to find other funding for that, for the rest of the super park.
Can you speak to like what caused it to sunset other than just time? You know, like speak
Just
to
time.
like why it didn't, you know, like what.
Just, well, because we
what
have the
didn't
library
happen at the
project, that we didn't wanna build a super park where they might put a parking lot. So since it's on the same parcel, I need to get the bigger project, cause that library is probably a bigger, higher use than a super park, so I need to make sure they get settled. And then I can put the super park where it's complementary use to the library. But I need to know where everything's going on the site before I do that.
So at what point would things be in a better shape to say, we can now re-add a super park to a warrant article, get the funding for it? When would we have that? Is that we talking 1 year out, you know, the 3 years out, whatever the library is done? You know, when it's done, can we add it? You know, when would that come down to being a, you know, thing that would happen to?
First of all, people have to find agreement and consensus on how much they wanna spend on the super park. So we're just kinda cobbling
That-
together money.
That sort of happened in the first CPC article anyway, with the super park, didn't it?
I don't think so. I don't think people fully grasped, you know, is there gonna be a spray ground and super park? Is there gonna be lockout bathrooms on the back of the library, which I think it's designed to do that now, which is great. So there's a lot of pieces that still need to be done. The site needs to be designed first and laid out before we move forward with how big that super park is, and that'll drive the cost. But I would say October, we should make, you know, a concerted effort to put the delta for whatever it is, once we know that that site is laid out, where that super park's gonna go and how much we're gonna allocate. I would say October.
And like what committee or people in particular would start that process to actually make that, you know, a thing that's happening again?
It would be staff, and it would be the Recreation Commission.
Okay.
do we still have the, Super Park Study Committee? Does that still exist, or does that get
I don't,
dissolved?
well, Jen was on it, and they, when they voted to create the committee, they said if you don't present something by a certain date, that group sunset as well. So I don't think there's anybody who's really has command of the reins at this point for the super park. That's why I say staff and recreation will be the two that'll figure it out. But not a, I mean, it's a priority, but not, in light of everything else, it's not a super priority.
The super
Good
park,
answer.
the super park. Well, I think you'll
I
have a
did not
better
do that
idea.
intentionally.
Yeah.
Oh, that was good.
You'll have a better idea once, like, the library project,
Yeah.
you know, gets finalized.
Yeah, I need to know where that building's huge.
The parking lot and.
Yeah. Does anybody have, what, I mean, so I talked for an hour, I mean, what are you all interested in? What do you wanna see your government do? Tell David too, cause he's
Yeah.
got money back there.
Yeah.
He's got $43 billion.
Yes, and I
You have
wave a
61
wand,
million.
figure it all out.
So, yeah, tell
Maybe
me,
few weeks.
what
Discuss.
bothers you? What don't you like? What
I'd
do
like
you
recycling every single week, please.
That's $400,000. What would you like me to cut to get you that? Or do you want me to raise taxes?
I'll
And that's
pay
what
more
I'll
for
do.
my garbage bags if you pick up my recycling every week. Cause I'll use less garbage bags
That'd be-
if somebody picks up my
Being
recycling.
expensive garbage.
That'd be a $30 roll on 5 trash bags. 'Cause we get $4.25.
Unless you're willing to go wave top instead of drawstring, then we can talk.
I don't know what that
Why
is.
are we using drawstrings?
What's a wave
I mean,
top? I
if-
might, if you pick up my
It's
shoes.
just like, you just tie it yourself, there's no string.
Remember
It
old
goes
trash
like this,
bags
so
Goes
you
and
have-
like
stuff?
this,
It's
you
higher
twist
on
and then
one
you-
Okay, I don't take the trash out, sure, go ahead.
Yeah, well, in
That's
two
what
thousand
Lisa
eight, when we
Shaw.
started this program, I sat in this room, it was a lot different back then, and people were adamant
Yeah, that's
who
awesome.
attended.
That's
You
because
all
they were
did
new.
that.
Drawstring bags were a novelty at that time. Now they're the standard. So the expectation is gonna be around the drawstring bags. However, they're terrible. All brands of drawstring bags now are pretty much equally terrible. But we're double and in some cases triple bagging just to make it to the curb. So I hear.
Well, just, I need people to understand this, there is a failure built into the bags. They're supposed to fail at
After so-
30 pounds of weight. You can't put 60 pounds in the bags. So, I live here, I have 3 kids, my wife and I have 1 trash bag, which is a beautiful thing, because I recycle a whole bunch.
Oh, yes.
And I buy a lot of trash bags, because I know the price is gonna go out of sight, right? I've never had a problem with a bag, and I do the trash. So I don't know if I just
Do you have
get
cats?
lucky. Cats?
Yeah.
No, yeah,
Sand, she's
litter
got
is
a
heavy.
litter box.
So I'm carting 10 to 20 pounds of litter in 2 bags to the curb.
But with trash.
Huh?
But with trash
A
on
little
top.
bit of trash, a little bit of trash.
Yeah, but there is a
But
failure.
they're only
And
putting
with-
trash
with
out every
inspection,
other
There is a
week.
failure
It's
built
25
in.
pounds for the large bag, 15 pounds for the small bag.
Yeah.
But with litter, I have cats also, and I live in Worcester, which is pay as you throw. I put it in a plastic bag, put it in a Glad bag, put it in a Worcester trash bag.
That's what I
Because
do.
litter is heavy, and it's the only way to
I
get
just
them
would
to pick
prefer
it
to
up.
not have to
That's
do
why I
those
don't.
things.
I know,
That
I know.
works.
But even
But
if you
if we're
had a
recycling-
Glad bag, it's the same, the mill is cheaper, it's 0.9. If you go look at the mill on a bag at Stop and Shop, not you go Stop and Shop today because they're on strike.
Yeah.
But look at the mill, MIL, it'll be a 0.9, ours are 1.5,
4.5.
1.45. So I don't know.
I will say, I do about 10 pounds of trash a week. I put it in with the large bags. I've had at least 10 to 15 bags rip on me in the last year that I can count for sure, just that little bit of poundage.
Where do they rip? At the drawstring?
Mostly near the drawstring and the seam.
Yeah.
A lot of times even near the bottom, just right along it.
So would anybody here be opposed if I went out with a weigher? And like a luggage weigher, right? I
Go
could
for it.
send someone around, just like the analysis we're gonna do for our staffing, and weigh your trash, would anybody be opposed to that?
And film it so we can see.
No, I'll live stream it on YouTube.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we can do that, and I'll guarantee you that they're heavier than you think.
I'll guarantee there are people that are doing more than that.
Oh, yeah.
That's for sure. I've seen things that look like they're held together with duct tape just because of how big they are. But I mean,
And the reason why they fail because we built a budget around selling bags. We built a program around bags, so if you could fit 60 pounds in every bag, we're upside down on the numbers and this won't work.
now
Yeah, we're not paying for bags,
Use your
we're paying
garbage
for service.
disposals
Right.
more.
Yeah.
That's my first thing. You have pizza, put the pizza down the garbage disposal. That's the first thing we all need to do. It's hard. When that pizza's cold and stale, and to crap it down,
Why
it's
would
hard.
you-
Unless you have well,
Water.
and you can't,
Unless
you
you
can't
have
have a
water,
garbage
you shouldn't have it.
disposal.
Why are we throwing
Exactly.
pizza away?
Pizza away. That's a good question.
Do we not have microwaves?
I got a perfectly good garbage disposal right here.
Is Harvey really still the only game in town that we have to use? Like, can we start like a bidding war against another company and them?
We're getting a good deal.
No.
right
We
now.
are, okay.
Compared to
Compared
what
to
everybody else is
waste
going through with
management
trash
and-
and recycling, to get the deal we have.
Yeah.
I mean, you gotta remember, you weren't on finance committee when I got here at 8, right? But you were over $1 million for trash and recycling. Now you're still in the 8 and 850.
925.
She told me it
I'm
was
sorry.
75 grand.
And
That's
I-
a
I
bag.
like real numbers, so.
Under,
on
Yeah.
that- on the trash
Still
point,
under.
on the trash point, why
I
did
had-
we switch to
Good.
why did we switch to the town-wide program in place of individual homeowners or landlords getting someone to come in? Because I'll say I do 1 trash bag a week. I do I have 2 recycle bins. I do two recycle bins a week. My mother lives in Sturbridge. She has to pay, a company herself directly. She's able to get trash and recycling every week for less than I pay on trash bags.
I don't believe that.
Yeah.
I don't believe that.
$23 a month.
I don't believe it.
Bring the
But-
bill in, bring the bill in.
I will tell you this, if you go to Tidy Town, right now in Westboro, you'll pay $65 a month. You get a nice bin, you roll it to the curb. But how did we get here? You had a budget problem in 2008,
Yeah.
and we instituted a pay-as-you-throw program for the bags, which generated $425,000 in revenue, and it pushed your trash number down, because we have to pay to tip it at Wheelabrator, by at least $200,000. So we had a budget decrease and we had added revenue to the system. So we always thought that the taxpayer should enjoy trash service curbside with recycling. And if you wanted to keep it, you had to institute the program. So I don't mean to be fierce with you about not believing. I just, every piece of research we've done,
Yeah.
it,
We
it's
did that
been
analysis
45 to
for the
65 bucks.
before we asked them to increase the fee. Looked at, if
She
people
got a
had
good
to
deal,
go
I'll tell you
out.
that.
Yeah.
So I won't say I don't believe it, she's got a good deal.
So
I
we're
live-
still getting a bargain.
I live next door
Oh, yeah.
in Northbridge, and my trash every 3 months is about 128. So you're talking a little over $40 a month. I would sort of like to be able to
Yes,
pay
you do
by the
one bag,
bag.
you do,
Yeah.
so it costs you $7 a month for your trash, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
recycling.
You do recycling over there?
Oh, yeah.
Alright.
Yeah.
Weekly?
It is weekly.
Alright, so there's a value
There you
there.
go.
There's a value there. Just buy another bin.
Moving to Northbridge.
I have 3 bins.
I do.
So buy another bin, I just come in here and just
Call
buy another
Harvey.
Call Harvey, they'll
Harvey.
send it right, they'll drop it
Okay.
right out to your curb. Oh, we are solving problems today.
When people do buy a second or third bin from Harvey, does that make the town incur more money for the recycling, or is
No.
it?
No, because you pay for it and they're there to pick it up anyways, that's in their cost for transportation of the trash.
So you had asked earlier, I really just want to get off trash bags now. I feel like it's the horse that's been beaten to death. You asked what you want us, what we want to see from our town government, and I actually have a compliment. I do appreciate more online presence. I appreciate more information coming directly from the town as well as from the local paper. And I would just like to see that increase. Like what we talked about tonight with Super Park, there are so many people in this town that are so angry about that. But what you said makes total sense. That's something that I feel like should be communicated to the community. So maybe we can kind of simmer down some of the angers that every time somebody posts something about needing money, we don't hear, well, the library and well, the Super Park. Because that's what's gonna happen every time we wanna do something new. It's just, people are mad. And I think if we can communicate better, we can kind of, simmer things down a little bit.
Help me understand that though, they're mad because we're doing
Because
too
they
hard
don't
or not doing
understand,
too hard?
because they feel cheated, because they were promised something that we didn't get. They felt like their kids would be able to use it, and their kids are, in high school
Oh,
now,
I got you,
right?
I got you, yeah,
When
yeah.
my daughter was in 4th or 3rd grade, they had the kids draw pictures of what they would like the Super Park to look
Yeah.
like, and my daughter's a freshman. So I think expectations were, we're getting this imminently. And I think, we know government moves slowly, but a lot of people don't understand that, and they don't understand the difference between building a library and, more money for roads. They don't understand the distinction there.
No, that's a good point. So I've not heard of the anger about Super Park not being built, so it's the first time I heard of it. But
Oh,
we would
it's
certainly
there.
communicate that.
It's
'Cause
there.
it's not been, and I would say that the elected officials that are on the Board of Selectmen, they are the conduit to the people, and they get directly elected. People gotta call them and say, this is what we're concerned about. Town administrators don't typically do this to say, what do you want, what do you need? When you come to me, I will have that conversation, but we don't usually sit here and have this forum. He holds office hours because he needs to do constituent affairs. Today it's my job, but it's not always my job. But I'm glad we can do that. We can provide more content that's online, but I could never guess that Super Park was making people upset because it hadn't been done. I could never have guessed that.
Well, you wouldn't have to have office hours if you just wrote public input on the selectmen's agenda. Yeah.
There it is.
You would have office hours every other week at a meeting.
That's a good point.
Or every
Would it
week.
would it be possible to have a bylaw or in a few years, update the charter to require that for, selectmen meetings or for maybe even all committee meetings? I don't know if that's something we can put into a bylaw, but.
Is that even charter level?
It probably could be
I think a bylaw could do that, because it's part of our bylaws governs the operation of multiple member bodies, which is the term for the various, collective term for the various boards and committees. We do have bylaws, there are some charter provisions about that, that's more of a bylaw. I'm sure one could contemplate a bylaw that might accomplish that.
I think I might, seriously, for October.
So in one of my previous towns, it actually was written into a general bylaw, or it may have been their charter, that every committee had public input. The challenge was always like planning board. We've had it for the last 4 or 5 years, but we usually skip over because there's not many people that come to talk to planning board on issues. I had observed, this was in Wayland, where they had to put bookends because you'd be an hour long, and this came from, I believe it was a petitioner article that then had it put in place, and for about 6 months until the following town meeting where they could change it, it basically resulted in an hour and a half discussion on things weren't even on the agenda. So they had to put bookends that basically said any one topic, sort of like town meeting, you recognize for 5 minutes, and if it's important, it gets scheduled for another agenda, or your time's up and goes on, and like it was a maximum of 15 minutes. A lot of times you never hit it, but all the time around town meeting you sort of did as more issues came up and people viewed it as more important. So there are probably examples out there, Wayland may be one, that but then did put bookends on it so that it doesn't end up occupying the whole night.
Yeah, but it's, I think they don't do it in general from a state law perspective is because they don't wanna violate open meeting. You come in with your issue of Super Park, not on the agenda, and your elected officials feel compelled to fix whatever issue you came to them with, right? And if they start to take things up
They can talk.
that aren't on the agenda, then they violate open meeting law. So that's, unless they have enough foresight to say, you should schedule this for another meeting, and then you have to come back, that's where it gets tricky.
In the school department, if I may add, we've had this forever. We've always had open public input at the very beginning of the meeting. And really, we limit it to, like you said, 3 to 5 minutes. And I always talk to the people who are there to just be very clear, concise. And I said, don't expect a conversation, okay? And let us take the next appropriate action. And we had that just recently happen with a woman who wanted us to change policy on kindergarten acceptance age requirements, or ability, I should say. That kind of changed a little bit afterwards. And because it would have violated the open meeting law if we started discussing and making decisions to what they said, when we went to future agenda planning, we basically said, okay, let's add this to the next agenda. And then when she was there, she said, great, I'll be at the next meeting. And that's the way he handled it. But you gotta have, I think you really have to have a really strong chair that knows how to manage, that outcome and keep the rest of the board in line in that respect too, to make sure that they're not having an open conversation on something that isn't even on the agenda.
All you need is 100 voters. Or 10 if it's annual.
Consider it done.
All right, anything else you wanna cover? Oh, we're meeting next week, Thursday the 25th, Nelson, if you wanna tour that building, if you've never been there, it's a quaint little building.
Quaint.
Yes.
It's interesting, for a 70s decor.
It is.
Now, the old South Grafton Library, that, in my mind, would be better described as quaint than Nelson. Nelson is relatively modern.
Yeah, well, we're not going that one, so. I don't have any ADA, I can't get anybody in the door.
Yeah, well, South Grafton is not a library anymore.
Yeah, they did a great job with that, the Historic Society.
South Grafton Museum.
One quick question that I've heard mentioned before, but I don't know the actual answer. I didn't look into this in too much detail myself. We previously had a animal control officer that was directly employed by our town.
Correct,
Now we're doing
3 towns.
3 town. Are we
Well, yeah,
saving money annually by
No,
doing
you're not
that?
saving money.
Spending more?
Yep.
We didn't have animal control, we had a dog officer.
And you had
Everything
huge
else sorta
liability as a
just-
result of that, because we had no place to take the dogs, there was no shelter, they were being housed in a person's house, in a basement. It's not, it was huge liability for us if we continued the service level we were providing.
And how much, I mean, that was a very minimal budget line item.
$7,500.
Yeah, so I
It
mean,
went to-
anything
it went to
would have been
20
an
It went
increase.
to 21,000 or 17,500.
21,500.
21,500.
Is
So,
there-
so I think someone asked the question, why did this go up 135% or whatever the number was?
Yeah.
It was
It's a
significant,
lot.
and that's why.
Well, now we have someone 24/7, someone will always come out, it's not just dogs, it's cats, birds, whatever. We have people following up on dog licenses, going door to door, so
There's
it's-
reporting requirements to the state too, that we don't wanna do, to be honest with you, and it wasn't being done, and now it is being done.
And regardless of how many calls we have as a town, it's the same annual cost with this program?
Correct.
Okay.
For this fiscal. You know,
Yes.
the group, the three communities will decide what their true costs are, and then they'll say, hey, there's gonna be a 5% increase, or 9, or 2, or 6, or whatever their costs are. The same thing we do, we host the Veterans District before 3 other communities, we do the same thing, we administer with a host community for that, and we send out bills quarterly to those 3 other communities, and they pay us based on that.
And where they say there's gonna be a 5%, 10%, whatever increase, we don't have any like negotiating power to make that less, would that be accurate? I'm
Well,
not thinking that.
I'll serve with the veterans,
Yeah.
as a board of directors, and the same with this intermunicipal agreement. We sit with them when they're developing the budget for these folks, so, yeah, but I mean, the costs are the costs.
Yep, that's what I expected.
Yeah, we know, we're in the room, it's not like they're just handing me a piece of paper saying, pay this amount. All right, well, thank you all for coming.
Thank you.